First of all, welcome to the first of many virtual collaboratories that we're doing in the webinar space. This we're representing the Collaborative Commons. So the collaboratories are things we've done in the past when we haven't been sequestered from one another. So collaboratories, as we'll get into in just a moment, is really opportunities for people to come together. This particular session is really about some of the essential collaboration skills. And I originally in the post said for leading in a chaotic world, but I chose to use the term VUCA. And for those of you who may not be familiar with that term, VUCA is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, which I think we could bundle it up into a lot of different things that are happening around us right now as related to the pandemic and the impending financial crisis. Hopefully we can get past that. But my name is Scott Winter. For those of you who don't know me, I'm one of the smarteners, if you will, of the Collaborative Commons. It's really kind of a group of people that have come together. My two other panelists who are really helping to kind of monitor the chats and the questions are Mark Jones from Australia. He's with a group called Generic Business Solutions out of Australia, and he and I have done some stuff related to, well, I've known Mark for over 20 years, and I've been doing work down in Australia for quite a while. Most recently, doing some collaboratories as a result of supporting communities coming out of the fire recovery and just business development down in Australia a couple weeks ago. And then my other colleague, Josef Funke, who is a brand new dad of his second son. I got to witness an amazing ceremony today of the naming of his child, virtually, of course. And Josef and I have been together for about 3 years. And he's been one of my closest, he's actually my partner with the Brain Friendly Dynamics as well as the Collaborative Commons as well. He's an amazing strategist and a key player in the work that we do. So they're going to be kind of fielding questions as we go. But I will say that I want to kind of play this game with you all that I'm going to be calling people to see, there are going to be a set of questions that we're going to be asking as we go through this. And I'm just going to be calling on people to, and you could pass if you're not prepared to answer the question, because some people on the call are internal processors and need a little more time, which is okay. But one of the strategies that I've found in doing a lot of virtual meetings and making sure that the virtual meetings are engaging is just keeping people's brains ready and prepared. So there are times where I'll be facilitating a meeting and I'll just simply say, so Josef, what are your thoughts on this? And really hope that he's prepared to answer. And what it does, it really helps people attend to the comments and the content of the meeting. And so we're going to play a little bit of that today as well. So going to go through that. So let's get started. So I love this quote. Always like to start with some quotes here. And I think we're in an interesting time in our history. So as you can see from this quote here, this is about creating some new paths, things that we don't know what's on the other side of this current dilemma that we're in. But we really have some opportunities, I think, if we're collaborating on the front end, that hopefully will become stronger and better on the back end. So I love this quote. I share it in some of the sessions. So if you guys want a copy, I'd be more than happy to share this with you as well. I do want to introduce to you, though, the agenda. So we did set introductions. I'm going to do a little overview of the Collaborative Commons. So we actually have another location that we manage through a company called Mighty Networks. It's a platform where we post, these interviews. We post other things, articles, but also other members of the Commons will post questions. A few weeks ago, someone was asking a question related to mental health in the workplace, and as a result of that, I did an interview of a guy named Peter Diaz and Emmy Golding from the Workplace Mental Health Institute, and we talked about the 7 pillars of mental wealth. And so we really want to build a community by which you guys could be a part of creating content and also exploring areas and issues that you guys want to work through, but not feeling like you're alone. And then we'll talk a little about the collaboratory series, and we'll jump into the 5 practices of radical collaboration in the chaotic or VUCA world. And then I'm going to share with you kind of what we're going to be planning for next week as an offering for people who are interested in looking at how to plan for a future that doesn't exist yet. So again, feel free to ask questions online in the chat if you have any as we go. So I want to introduce you to the concept of the Collaborative Commons. So I have grown up in the space of collaboration since high school. I grew up in a nonprofit called the California Association of Student Councils, where we really were teaching young people how to plan and run activities And I'm just passionate about this idea of what do we do to bring people together? Because stress in any system is when demand exceeds capacity. And the clear assumption here that I'm making in promoting collaboration is to, by increasing our capacity, we can meet some of those demands. And the demands today, and a lot of uncertain demands that we don't even know yet they're going to emerge, let's hope that we can meet it together. So what we're trying to build is a global community dedicated to developing, disseminating, implementing new, I have to see what's behind here. Whoop, sorry about that. New concepts, methods, and resources that develop strong leaders, teams, organizations, and communities. Our ultimate intent is to increase our collective capacity to address the demand of our time. So that's what we're trying to build. And again, if you want to be a member of the Commons through the Mighty Networks, please reach out and we will get you signed up as soon as possible. The other part of this is how we do that is what we are doing is we curate experiences. So these collaboratories have been exercises. I know some of you out on the call have actually experienced them. In a live format, we are working on how to create that into the virtual format. And hopefully as we move past the social distancing, we can come back into introducing more ways to come together in these collaboratories. But we typically are in the business of curating these experiences. We want to create synergies by fostering connections amongst all the participants. I have worked with many of you and some I have yet to work with. But the whole idea is how do we come together and mash and really converge what we know to add value to the greater communities. We also are in the process of managing the infrastructure. So Joseph has been working really hard to develop kind of a technology infrastructure that allows for us to collaborate, share, learn, teach out to the broader market that also can create value for yourself as well as the people who are signing on. And then last but not least is really to nurture the intelligence of the group and the ability of the whole by helping capacities for leadership and innovation among all of us. So again, we're really about building the capacity through the collaboration. So what is a collaboratory? What we do in these collaboratory spaces, we're curators of these experiences where we hopefully discover and practice new ways of thinking, doing, and being. And I think with the crisis that we're in, it's going to require some new ways of thinking, doing, and being, as we've already all been practicing in terms of just having to deal with the social distancing dilemma. The other part of the equation in terms of what we're here to do today is really introduce you to some of the key practices that are essential for cultivating collaborative environments, really working from the radical collaboration content that I've been exposed to now for the last 3 or 4 years as a result of actually playing a game with Joseph many years ago called Fresh Biz. And it was really a game that got me thinking, if we're going to be working this way, it's going to require radical collaboration. And I would say that the times that we're in is starting to lead how we're going to basically move through these changes without the radical collaboration. We're going to have to do new things, new ways of thinking. So I see a comment from Catherine. All right. So with that, in order to do that, this is some of the things that we share in terms of what are going to be the future skill sets and mindsets of dealing with some of the impending changes. This was in the context prior to the crisis where a book had come out recently called The Future is Faster Than You Think. And within that space, it's all about converging technologies. I don't think they could have anticipated a pandemic coming out several weeks after. But the idea is, how are we going to be dealing with some of these existential challenges that are coming our way? Things like AI and machine learning are all going to have huge implications. I think the pandemic is going to speed up some of those technologies and those applications of technologies in the future. But these are some of the things that we really try to work with and try to develop through the introduction of some of the collaborative principles that we teach and the experiences that we create through the collaboratories. And again, this comes from the World Economic Forum. So what I'm going to hit on today, and there will be a set of questions that we'll be asking, and we'll be asking for you all to respond to. And again, I might just call names. So if you guys are prepared, please say that you're ready to say something. But in the 5 essential collaboration skills, the book Radical Collaboration was written by a gentleman named Jim Tam. And he worked with a guy named Will Schutz, and Ethan and his wife Lauren are on the phone, are on this call, and hopefully they'll add to the conversation in a moment. But it's really built on the human element principles of, how do people show up in in just about any situation. And Jim, in working with Will and a guy named Ron Lewitt, wrote a book called The Radical Collaboration. It came out many years ago. And the second edition just came out in, I think, December of last year. And there are really 5 essential practices that we really focus on. And in the book, they talk about them. And I think there's even more work that's being done. I know that I and Joseph and Mark and I are also, and Ethan and Lauren are really saying, what could we do to add more content and experiences for people on how to use this stuff? But the first one is collaborative intent. And we'll go through the definitions in just a moment. This idea of openness, self-awareness, self-accountability, and interest-based negotiations and problem solving. So these 5 practices are really, like anything, a practice that you want to develop and hone as you continue to develop. So even though I do this work, I'm always focusing on all 5 of these in the work that I do. In some area, I have to be more focused on self-awareness and self-accountability, but they're not in any sort of prioritized order. They're kind of a collection of relationships, of concepts that we kind of blend into our facilitation. So with that, I want to kind of go through each of these and just define and then open it up to a conversation to see what are we doing to address this. Because if you think of the challenges that we're coming into, the first is really about the cloud of intent. This idea of individuals can maintain an authentic, non-defensive presence and make a personal commitment to mutual success in their relationships. And what I want to highlight here is the term mutual success. With many groups that I've worked with prior, typically at the beginning of the year, I do a lot of facilitation of board retreats where they're doing their strategy and their planning. I know that Mark Jones in Australia is doing some of those. And everyone has set up these plans for the 2020 that are now have been completely blown up. And so the question is, how do we come back to think about what does success look like in the new normal? So the question I want to pose to the group and ask you who are working in this space, what can you do now, or what are you doing now to facilitate clarity in a constantly changing environment? I know that for me, it's really important to say, what do we know now? And knowing what we know now, what can we be doing to continue to move the ball forward within our own context? But I'd like to throw it out to the group and maybe see if anyone's willing to play the game right now. And so I'm just going to throw it out and just ask, Ethan, do you want to respond to this question in terms of what can people do now to facilitate this? And if you say yes, you're going to go on speaker live. Ethan, Lauren, okay, Ethan, I'm going to put you on live here. So you are now on unmute. Ethan Schutz.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. Introduce yourself too.
My name is Ethan Schutz. Thank you for talking us up. Gold is here with me. We run the Schutz Company, and we offer both radical collaboration and the human element materials and promote its use. We've been working with Scott and recently Joseph. Just full disclosure, we are actually cooking dinner right now, so apologies if we're a little distracted.
No problem.
Because we now have 2 full-time jobs, not only our business, but suddenly we are teachers as well for our kids. Homeschooling. So
nice. That talk about a mutual success and having a collaborative mindset.
Well, it requires that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
What would I say about this question? To facilitate clarity, I'm actually working with a specialty animal hospital. Recently, we've been working with them for several years, and suddenly everything has changed, as we know. They have gone into crisis mode, no surprise. The good news is that they have been deemed an essential service. So like other medical facilities, they are still open. And so I've been helping them by facilitating a lot of their meetings, right, as they figure out how to deal with this crisis and their protocols and so forth. There is no substitute for being, for slowing down to go fast, for being exceptionally clear, for checking understanding, and for giving people a chance to release their emotional reactions to things. I've found a number of times simply doing something as easy as structuring a meeting and sticking to it very carefully and having people double check that they really understood each other can go a very long way in facilitating in a changing environment like we're saying.
Great. Thank you, Ethan. Faye, Would you mind sharing? You just posted something, but I've definitely had a lot of experience with Faye. In fact, I grew up with Faye in the cask. So Faye, you want to share your concepts?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, wonderful. So definitely agree with kind of all the comments that were said as well, is that consistently communicating. I also found that kind of sense of transparency to update them consistently of what you know and being honest of what you don't know, but also one-on-one with your team members as well, because each person's going through a different response.
Yeah.
Each one's in a different situation. So I think, checking in with people one-on-one. I was kind of reading up some kind of best practices that people are all sharing, which has been kind of an amazing part of this is like, they're also saying, you could actually, if you have a larger team, really have buddies, have people kind of collaborate because you might not be able to connect with everyone one-on-one, or they might not be comfortable if you're like a manager of them, right? But even having peer one-on-one so that people are checking in with each other, supporting each other during this time as well.
Right. Thank you. Tim, would you be willing to share what you're doing? Just so you know, Tim, I put you on unmute. Tim Donahoe.
Hi, Scott, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. Good afternoon, good evening, whatever time zone you're in. One thing I'd like to emphasize, and I think about our past work together at the FDIC, is the power of having complementary styles on a team. Different people, each of us, the thing I find fascinating about org work and careers is that we're all in the same room together, working together, and each of us came via a different journey with different life experiences. So we each see things a little bit differently, and together we can see the whole picture. And I think that's just really, really powerful. It's also another way of saying, diversity. Sometimes people have a reaction when they hear diversity and they think it's going to be sort of really gnarly, hot button topics and get into, race and gender and things. But to me, it's just having multiple perspectives, and together we can kind of untie the Gordian knot together.
Great. Catherine, I'm going to come to you next. So hold on a second. Catherine, where are you here? Oh, where'd you go? Are you on, Catherine? Hold on a second. Where'd you go? This is the battle that I play with all the time here. Oh, here we go. Catherine, you're allowed to talk now. Sorry about that. Catherine, you have a comment?
Hi, Scott.
Yes, you're on.
Okay. Sorry. I think there's another, I'm not sure, but there was another Catherine who's also going to be on the webinar today. So first, thank you for doing this. It's fabulous. One of the things that I have been doing and being much more mindful and practiced in is giving people the permission to slow down. When I recognize they are anxious, they're fearful, an awful lot of times in therapy kind of modalities, we will ask people to sometimes, even with a hand gesture, to say, is it okay if we can just slow this down? If we can slow down what's happening for you right now, can we talk about this? Help me understand. And sometimes, as Ethan was saying, it is critical to slow down in order to go faster, or at least move at a pace that is meaningful and sort of connected to our times.
Right. And you bring up a really good point in that. Just slowing down really also helps you to, go to that deep connection that I think people are longing for, as well as really getting to a level of understanding. Because I think, when people are stressed out, as we all know, we're going to be more reactive, less likely to be non-defensive. And so when people are getting triggered, that slowing down and just kind of exploring it in a safe space is really critical. Because I think I'm actually writing an article right now just on, you know, how we deal with these, how do we deal with stress in these existential crises? And, you know, there's some really key insights around that one. So thank you all for this particular question. I want to move on to the next one now. The second collaborative skill set or practice is this idea of self-accountability, where individuals take responsibility for the circumstances of their lives, the choices they make either through action or failing to act, and both the intended or unforeseen consequences of their actions. They would rather find a solution than find someone to blame. We often say in the radical collaboration space that in a highly collaborative environment, there's no one to blame and everyone's accountable. And I find it sometimes that often in a crisis situation, there's no time to blame and everyone does really step up. I was actually working with a client just a few weeks ago that was talking about how, maybe it's just last week, we had a conversation with someone in IT space that this idea of social distancing is really, in a sense, started to help them collaborate because everyone realized that they need to step up in this moment. So the question that we have is, how are you, in a way, helping your team make sense of the situation that we're in? And why I ask it in this way is, in the human element work, we talk a lot about the power of choice. And one of the things that I'm really cautious of, or at least being aware of, is that sense of when people feel helpless or hopeless or feeling that things are meaningless. Could be a real drag, especially in terms of them making sense of a situation. And if they're making sense in a negative light, then it can really spin out of control from a team. And we can talk about how that can lead into the drama triangle, which is something we've shared in the past. So I would love to hear, what are you doing? And it sounds like we kind of hit on it a little bit. For example, you know, Catherine, your point of just slowing down. Well, what are some other things you guys are finding helpful to really shift people from feeling helpless to hopeful or hopeless to hopeful? But yeah, so Catherine, you're back on. You're unmuted.
Okay. So I just had a conversation with a client, in fact, a couple of clients this week, very, very different responses to this crisis. One of the leaders that I'm working with happens to be part of a family-owned long-term care, senior care, residential number of properties. And he's working with his team who, like all of us, have families and work and multiple responsibilities. He has, I think, some really big responsibilities around making sure his senior residents, you know, are safe. And so his teams are working 24/7. They're very anxious. They're very stressed, not knowing, you know, what resident is going to come down with this. So one of the things that I find myself doing, or the two of us do, is to first check in, and not about the business, but to check in about how he is doing, what he is doing to help sort of maximize his choices in this time. One of the ways we do that is to talk about how he's just managing his own emotions. What are the emotions that he's feeling? What are some of his defensive strategies? How are those showing up now? How is he seeing those defensive strategies in the people with whom he works? What are some of the questions he can ask, the exploratory questions that he can ask? Again, kind of moving with the radical collaboration, I think, approach around, you know, questions before statements, asking really effective questions, and then being transparent with respect to our reasoning behind that question, and helping people sort of learn that. It's also a way to help people slow down.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Let me see. How about Glenn Olson? What do you say to this one, brother? Glenn, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, welcome. I just want to hear your Southern accent. So.
Well, I appreciate that.
You're from Australia, right? No, I'm just kidding.
No, I'm from LA. That's
All
Lower
right.
Alabama.
Exactly. So how are you doing? I mean, you're doing a lot of work in kind of a blue collar environment, if I recall the last time I spoke. Maybe it's changed,
Yes. No, it's blue collar, and it's also primarily energy. So there's been a kind of a double whammy.
but
The market's been tough. I've got one of my big clients going through Chapter 11. And so this will complicate things. And then, my direct team is, I think part of the things that we've discussed is creating space so that people have an opportunity to think. And then, as I think has been mentioned before, sharing, what they feel, their feelings, their concerns, and making those not just organizationally, but just, holistically. I think that's, especially now, it's interesting. I've officed from home for many, many years. And one of the challenges that I hear from some of my contacts is this is the first time that they've had to office from home. So even that adjustment of now my kids are daddy, 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 mommy, 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 those adjustments for some folks are they're facing these for the very first time. And so I think helping them ask the right questions around what is the priority given the roles you play. And those roles extend out beyond just what you do at work. How can you create a schedule and a routine that helps you fulfill the roles you have kind of in a new space, in a new workspace?
Right.
You may be sharing, because I've officed alone, and now my wife is actually officing home because, she works for a school and they're kind of shut down. So we've had to reset just the routine. And so I think some of it is, as said before, asking really good questions, reflective questions, and also giving folks some space to think through it and to create a routine and a set of priorities that make sense given the roles that they play.
Right. As you're talking, Glenn, the thing that kind of pops for me is that, when you think about the different roles that I'm playing at home. I'm a teacher, I'm the cook, I'm the business person, I'm the, husband, I'm the spouse, whatever. And, part of, a question I often ask groups is like, where are you feeling fulfilled, where you're not fulfilled? And it's ultimately tied to how much control they feel they have. So to the point around just kind of having a system and a really being clear on, between this time and this time, this is the hat that I'm going to wear so I can be in control and create some, you almost have to create some new social contracts when you're at home in this new dynamic. But I think, to me, I'm finding that sense of being out of control or that feeling of helplessness is a big driver for that stress that we're seeing out there. So by giving people that structure and a system that they can say, in this role, this is where I'm going to be, in this, how I'm going to show up, I'm in control here, and then I can transition into the parent or the school teacher or whatever. So there is a lot of shifting roles, so that's a great point. Ethan, you have your hand up, so I'll unmute you as well. So, or there you go, go ahead.
Yeah, got it, thank you. Just a thought to tag on to what everybody is saying about this. I think it makes a lot of sense. I find a really helpful question for clients and for myself, for that matter, in any situation, and especially a crisis one, is how do I want to show up right here, right now in this situation?
Right.
Anytime I'm able to ask myself that, especially right when I get triggered or I'm feeling tired or I'm hungry or I just at my wit's end, if I can stop and ask myself, wait, how do I want to be right now? I find it so helpful for stepping back, doing what we're talking about, dropping my defensiveness and really thinking about, in what mindset do I want to come from? What energy do I want to come from? What role do I want to come from?
Right. Well, it's interesting because if you think about it in the context, I did a stress mastery course for Butte College yesterday, because on top of the coronavirus, where I live in Butte County is right next to where the Paradise Fire was just in November of 2018. And, I had 7 or 8 folks in this call yesterday on just dealing with the stress mastery. So on top of the trauma from the fire, we now have this additional layer. Same thing I think was happening in Australia. And so we talk a little about the triune brain. To your point, Ethan, is, the first question you ask is, am I safe, right? Am I loved, like in the moment? And then, okay, so what can I do right now? And it kind of brings you back into that area that you have control over. And I think in situations like this, we've got to be really mindful of, there's some things that are happening outside of our scope. We're not in control of Congress. We're not in control of, CDC. We're not in control of a lot of these things, we're in control of that space. So asking yourself those questions are really, really critical. So I appreciate that. So thank you all. We're going to move on to the next one just because of time and because
Can I add one thing, Scott?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Go for it. Yeah.
That just builds on everything everybody has said, and it's also the concept of gratitude. Like once you are in a state, what it is that you can be controlling, or what you're in control of, is also relating to it with somewhat of an appreciative inquiry approach of how do you want to be and what is it that you're grateful for, so you can build on that. Because right now it's so easy to look at the world as all the things that are lacking and that are falling apart. But that's not helping us to really build on the energy and really making smaller moves. Like we don't know exactly what the destination will look like. We still have our goals and we have our islands, as we talk about that in the Fresh Bliss metaphors. But it's about making smaller moves, really rolling the die, making a move that you can be in control of. And it might be daily moves of things that you can control, that you can be grateful for. And build on something that's already working and that you want to be expanding on, and then reassess the next day. So
yeah,
just keep the conversation flowing.
Yeah, I know. I think the metaphor that I kind of am kind of living with, and I excuse my language, sometimes I can be a bit irreverent, but we're all kind of in the same stuff, and we're on the same boat. And I think the key is, are we paddling together? Which I think is the point of this conversation, or am I just paddling for myself? And I think that's kind of the shift, because I think we're all in it, and it just gives me pause to just be grateful that we can get it through together. So thank you for that. So under self-awareness, this is the next kind of key principle here. And again, when I play the radical collaboration space for myself, not only am I looking at it as a practice of what I'm providing for my clients or my teams that I work with, but also how I apply it for myself. And so self-awareness is one that I think is really key, one that can throw us off our game when we're stressed and triggered. But the idea of individuals commit to knowing themselves deeply and are willing to explore difficult interpersonal issues, not always fun to do when you're in the middle of an existential crisis like we're in, but it does expose maybe some of those challenges. So, they seek to understand the concerns, intentions, and motivation of others, as well as the culture and context of their circumstances. And I think we've kind of hit on this a little bit, but part of this, in terms of managing people's states, this is about, I've heard about slowing down, asking those questions that Glenn was sharing. I use something called GPS for myself, and GPS is really what's called goal, purpose, and strategy. And so instead of the goal being an activity, a goal is more the state that I'm holding on to. What state am I choosing to be in? And for me, I want to be calm and confident. And my purpose for doing that is because I deal with anxiety already. Many of you guys probably don't know that, but I deal with anxiety. I had all my life. And my strategies for doing that are, eating well, sleeping well, doing the things that I know I should be doing. But I think a lot of times just having a way to kind of put my focus into that which I have control over is really being helpful. But I'm very deliberate about determining my state in advance. Like, this is what I want to be. So how can I set myself up to be this way when I step into the storm that's inevitably coming our way? But I think this is more maybe a question for you personally, for anyone out there. And I'm gonna kind of pick on somebody that hasn't spoke yet, but I'm just curious to know, what are you doing to take care of yourself? Because it's easy for us to all get caught up into trying to take care of others. And so, Laura Burgess, I'm going to ask you, and maybe you can add to what you're doing for others, but what are you doing to take care of yourself in all of this while you're trying to attend to the other people? And I'll get to you next, Kyle. So, Laura, you're on. Laura? Laura, are you there? All right, if not...
Are you there?
We're here. There, you're on now, Laura.
Okay, sorry about that. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Laura.
My name is Laura Burgess. Thanks for the question, Scott. And I didn't realize you ever struggled with anxiety. That's something that I've experienced as well. For me, someone mentioned time blocks or scheduling and things that we can control. And being under this lockdown situation and the slowdown, for me, what's great is being able to say I can meditate. And for me, using a breath, sky meditation is something that's really helpful to me. And now that I have my children quarantined and husband quarantined with me as well, I can share that with others. But I'm in the space with K-20 education. And so I guess in some ways fortunate for me. We do a lot of work using technology with well-being apps and mental fitness. And so, you know, focusing on the positive is something that we can do through our technology, the web-based applications that we have, the app in particular, you know, being able to give someone a place where they can engage with others, but through the digital platform, and using positive psychology and so forth to maintain engagement and community is something that now, you know, we've captured attention of, you know, hopeful new clients in this space. And so the radical collaboration piece, and I guess what I've even experiencing this week is, you know, working with school districts statewide in California, and now, you know, some interests outside of California and in other states like New York and Florida in particular. You know, it's a chance to start talking with people and just being real. I'm finding that people are letting their guards down, you know, rather than, you know, recognizing that we are all looking for positive solutions and we're all looking at ways that we can make the community whole. So I'm not sure what the original question was. How am I keeping balance and
for yourself? So I mean, you're doing great for others, but your meditation, it sounds like.
Yeah, for me, that's what it is. You know, I tried to go for a hike a little bit earlier today, and my my nice little hiking trail here is now roped off, and I guess it's against the rules to be outside even doing that. So yeah,
Wow.
I can create my own little cocoon with meditation, and I'm excited to be able to share that with others because it really is just so powerful. So that's what I'm doing.
Okay. Kyle, you're coming up next, and then Tainese, and then Gloria. So Kyle, you're up. Kyle, are you there, brother?
Unmute myself. All right, I'm here.
All right, you're up.
God, so yeah, I mean, in these times, I mean, we've been presented with an opportunity, and you know, myself and my fiancee Brittany, you know, have taken 2 morning rituals towards getting ourselves structured on, you know, on a path of meditation, of stretching, of getting the blood flowing, of things that, you know, we just overlooked in the past in very busy kind of, you know, a lot of movement lifestyle. And we've used this as an opportunity to check in with ourselves, to set daily outcomes for ourselves. You know, we've been practicing Wim Hof, to getting into the shower, into the cold shower to get the blood moving. And then just like, you know, and getting that started as the day, you know, one of the old illusions, just make your bed, because then you've done one thing today. At least you can be proud.
Right. That's a great point. That whole dopamine hit is huge. Yeah. So, and I'm a huge fan of Wim Hof as well. Although I will suggest that in the Wim Hof world, you want to avoid taking the cold showers if you want to keep your immune system stronger. Just so you know, that's kind of what they put out just the other day. So keep the breathing up, but just maintain, if you're not feeling well, don't take a cold shower. So,
and additionally, like, you know, like getting sun too right now.
Yeah.
Especially when the world is going into isolation, like vitamin D is one of the greatest protections that we have. That is a gift from the sun, and you know, and ensuring that we're getting ample vitamin D and vitamin C, eating healthy, and you know, enjoying about our days.
Very good, thank you, Tainese. Tainese, you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hi, I'm Tainese Wilson. And from my perspective, I think being isolated, kind of being quarantined alone, has given me a new kind of value to human interaction. So I know a lot of people, you know, have the family and the children that they're also dealing with. So that's another level of complexity. But when you're just isolated, when you're just quarantine alone, you have to find ways to be creative and still make sure you're getting that human interaction. So for me, it's been really important that I reach out to all of my family and all of my friends almost daily. And usually we'll do it through kind of text or chat, but I've been making a very strong effort to use those video capabilities just to kind of actually see another face, to see a smile, hear inflection in voices and things like that. And that's been really, really helpful. And then as a team in the workspace, just kind of just randomly, we've created like a folder on the shared drive, and people are, you know, sharing personal pictures. Like they see a sunset, they see, you know, deer in their backyard, their dog is doing something cute. They're sharing pictures of their children. So I think that's been a really good strategy as well.
Well, it's interesting because the byproduct of that, when you think of if we get to a semblance of normalcy, that the familiarity that you guys are creating through this process as a way of coping will hopefully strengthen your teams when you come back, which, you know, this is where I hope you guys are thinking, like, what are we doing now that we can leverage when we get past this, so that we keep building on the strengths of that intimacy, if you will. So thank you, Tyneese. Gloria, you're up next. Gloria. Are you there, Gloria? I feel like I'm on talk radio. Pardon, Mark?
Just saying I might jump in as well and have a bit of a chat about this one. I think it's critically important that we're cognizant of how we show up daily, you know, with our work peers, with our family, our friends, etc., and try and maintain as much normality in life as what is actually possible. A lot of people have spoken about their routines of exercise, eating well, stretching, breathing. They're all really positive stuff, but how do you influence others remotely to, you know, in your teams to take that approach and stance as well? And I think as leaders, that's something that we need to be really cognizant of, and really encouraging our teams and our people to be in touch with themselves, be in touch with their families, and do all these things we've been talking about. And I think that's the challenge of leadership, particularly when you're working remotely, is to keep your people engaged with themselves and looking after themselves.
Yeah, which I think we'll get into the next one around openness. So Gloria, I'm going to come back to you. Let me figure out how to unmute you here. So, all right. So you should be trying to unmute you here. Okay, are you there, Gloria? For some reason, I cannot unmute you. I'm pushing. Is there anyone that can help me on this one? Yosef, if you can try to get her to unmute. I can't. For some reason, it's not working. So Gloria, I'm painful that I can't. Something happening here.
See if Gloria can unmute from her end.
Yeah, Gloria, can you unmute from yourself, your end? Are you there, Gloria? I'm not hearing. I'm so sorry. If there's a comment, please add it to the list, and we'll try to get to the list. All right. So apologize for that, Gloria. I'm going to go to the next one here, and in terms of the next practice. So just as a kind of byproduct, one of the things that we talk a lot about in the radical collaboration is this idea of the red zone, green zone, and pink zone, or what we call the battleground, underground, and common ground. And again, I always encourage people to kind of be thinking about, what are you doing to build that common ground? To your point, Mark, around what are we doing to kind of make sure that we're being civil? And I think civility also lends itself in the common ground is that level of intimacy as well. So just in that intimacy, in the sense of just checking in and being human, as everyone has shared. So I'm going to go to the next one around openness. And this one, to me, in collaborative environments, what we talk a lot about is if we want to be collaborative, we got to reduce our defensiveness and increase our levels of openness. And so people are willing to tell the truth and listen to the truth. And that's a big one, especially now when people are dealing with feeling vulnerable and feeling the helplessness and maybe hopelessness and maybe even feeling meaningless in this bigger picture. So the question on this one is, what can we do to help people share what they're feeling through this process? And again, you know, as was shared earlier, Catherine, about slowing down, what are we doing, or what have you guys been doing to kind of really make sure people are expressing? And because maybe some of their frustrations are tied to maybe the frustration of being at home, to Glenn's point earlier. But I'm just curious to know, Tina, would you be willing to respond to this one? Because I just unmuted you. Tina, are you there?
Who are you trying to call?
Tina, on this question. And if you don't want to play, you can just sit. All right. We'll go to the next one then. Jim, how about you? You're in a different industry. I know you got some background. So Jim, what are you doing to kind of get people to get in touch with what they're feeling in this age of angst? Jim? All right. Does anyone want to raise your hand if you're interested?
This is Faye. I can share.
Okay, thanks, Faye.
One interesting thing we kind of did in an exercise, because it was a multi-hour meeting, was actually draw pictures of kind of how we're feeling, because sometimes that's helpful. You know, you could put words in there as well, but then that allowed people not, sometimes, you know, it's easier than voicing, and it also allows your introverts to have introspection time. So kind of drawing pictures. Also suggesting, like, periodically do what you want to do, anonymous surveys, right? Whether you're doing a Survey Monkey out there, so they might not feel comfortable, but then you'll get a pulse of the team or the company as well, and seeing if you can address it overall.
That's great. What do you now? These are executives. These are people, and they're actually drawing pictures and opening up. I'm assuming is this, and it's done virtually. I mean, again, I think a lot of times people will say, "Well, that would never work with my team," but these are unique circumstances where I think people do want to express themselves in a very authentic way. So, what are you finding with their openness to that exercise?
So this one was actually it was not just executives, but it was like a whole group, all the way from artists to innovators to funders to startups. So with that one, they were open to it because the expectation was this is about us engaging in a creative way, and that to be setting those expectations early on in the beginning of the meeting of that, you know, we're going to be for multiple hours. So
okay. It's a good way, just so you know, I do a lot in the flow space, and we talk a lot about one of the flow triggers for teams is like familiarity. So that's a good one. So appreciate that. So Glenn, what was your comment? And then we'll go Ethan and then Catherine.
You know, this was interesting. So a little context is every Sunday we get together with my mother-in-law and a select group of friends. And over the years, we've called it the Supper Club. And this week, actually today is my son's birthday, and so when it's the supper club, either preceding or right after, and we do it every Sunday, you get to pick the dinner and all that. And it's a big deal. So my wife actually set up
someone's got their background. You can put it yourselves on mute other than Glenn. Go ahead, Glenn.
So she set up a Zoom. So we did not do Supper Club in person, and so we had people that not only are there that live locally, we issued an invitation to people and good friends throughout the country. And I think we had 20, something like that, folks just checking in with where they are and what they're doing, from, excuse me, the pastor of our church to a friend in Pagosa Springs, Colorado, different industries. And so I guess the point was there was an invitation to connect. And I've seen my wife, who works for a very special school for special needs kids. It's a faith-based organization, and they have a flock, or they kind of have a meeting every school day. And they did that virtually this morning. And the common theme that's at least seems important to point out is it's an invitation to come and to participate. And in fact, that's what I thought about this evening, was an invitation to listen, when appropriate, share. And I think that's one of those things that can help people kind of share what they're going through and then what they're learning. You know, whether the routines you establish, the learning something new. So I'm having my 10-year-old teach me chess, never learned chess. And so all of these kind of invitations seem to create an opportunity for you to kind of share what you're feeling and then process what's going on. So.
Great, thank you. We'll go Ethan, Catherine, and then Kathleen. So go ahead, Ethan.
Hey, Scott, it's actually Lauren.
Oh, Lauren, okay. So, sorry, Lauren.
No, that's okay. We're logged in through the same account. So first of all, I just want to say I'm really touched by what Glenn was sharing. That was really beautiful. one of the things that I was thinking about was that, so much of this, I feel like it responds to what we were talking about how we show up and how open we are willing to be as facilitators. That if, I think if people sense our distance, they're going to be distance too. One of the things that we try and do with all of our work with people is this idea of creating an environment where we're all responsible for what we're going through and what we're doing, but no one is to blame. We're all here to take a mutual responsibility and accountability for getting through what we need to go through, dealing with a conflict, solving a problem. And so I think that, either as facilitators or as consultants, the openness and the willingness that we are willing to do to model what we're wanting to get from others has helped us inordinately in this period of time.
That's a great point. Thank you. Thank you. Catherine.
Yeah, I'll make this quick. And Lauren, I think that was great, the modeling. Just the other night, I turned around and I just snapped at my husband. And in that second, it was one of the deepest senses I had that I'm afraid, I'm scared. And I turned and I looked at him and I said, I am afraid. And when I am afraid, I get really angry. And he came over and he hugged me and he said, do you think that you're sharing something new with me? So the other thing too is the signs of defensiveness work that we often do, that you guys I'm sure know about, is to really get up close and personal with that work and help validate for the people that are around you, validate what they're feeling, reflect what they're feeling back to them, let them know it's okay to be feeling this. Now, I find that to be incredibly powerful to just validate what I'm hearing.
That's, it goes back to that deep listening, and I think if you think of the work around psychological safety, it's the idea of being able to say something and not only that, but then feeling heard, like really feeling it. And I think that's a key. I think people, hopefully that we're practicing some of those. So thank you. Kathleen.
Yes, hi there. This is Kathleen Hill, and I'm relating to everything everyone is saying, and it's just so wonderful to hear people put their experiences into words and share it with everyone. So thank you. One thing I have noticed is I just started doing it instinctively, I think, but kind of softening within myself, either when I'm in the midst of an interaction or sometimes even before, I'm getting ready to make a phone call or meet somebody. And that softening internally inside of myself seems to create more spaciousness for the other person. And kind of hand in hand with that, really welcoming them with a sense of openness. And I have to say, I actually had a conversation earlier today with Catherine. Great to talk to you here. And she and I had never had a full conversation before. It was our first time. And so I just want to say, Catherine, I felt exactly this. And I think that's what made it come to mind, is I felt from you this kind of welcoming and openness and that invitation to share my experience. So
that's great.
Yeah, it really made a difference. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. All right, so we're to the last particular principle or practice that we talk about, and this is the idea of interest-based negotiations and problem solving. And this is a unique one because it really, in the context of, I think, the space that we're in, that when we get into arguments a lot of times with another person, and again, if we're triggered, it goes back to, we get into positional arguments, especially around the house, like you're thinking about, you're arguing with your kids. It's like, what interest are we trying to meet here? Like we have our school interests, we got those grades we need to meet, we have So getting that stuff out on the table, like I said earlier, that new social contract is like, okay, we're going to be in a new normal for a little while. What interests do we want to kind of put out there on the table so that we're actually working towards supportive of that? Because a lot of times when we're arguing, it's more positional based. For example, Catherine, when you're saying around, I'm feeling really angry or whatever, like, well, what's behind that, and it's like just the need, my self-interest of just being appreciated or feel loved for that matter. And so the question is, how are you balancing the needs of your team members with the needs of your team or organization? Because I think, I find it oftentimes, especially in a time of crisis or when stress, is that self-interest generally kind of takes over the shared interest. And so I'm curious to know, how are you finding that balance? And Jennifer, if it's okay, I'd like to ask you, Jennifer Dice, to share kind of what you're experiencing in the sector that you're in.
Oh, Scott.
I love you, Jennifer. Come on. What do you got? What are you doing here? Because, you have a team. You have a team not only in your location in Dallas, but you have another team virtually. So how are you doing in this space?
I think this is going to be a really great education for me. I'm super uncomfortable with ambiguity. Let me see if I can move in the house so you guys don't hear the construction. And I'm finding that my team members not only need that additional ambiguity, but they need to be able to work around what's best for them, whether it's taking care of kids because their normal on time is at 4:30 a.m., or taking care of parents and whatnot, or just taking care of themselves. So it's been helpful for me to see how this is actually working in an environment that would typically make me just severely uncomfortable and probably start to manage differently.
Thank you. How about Rhodey? How about you? What are you doing to balance? Because you have deadlines you got to meet, you have work you got to get done, and you also have needs that need to be met. So how are you balancing it, Rhodey?
Absolutely. Some of the challenges that we're facing is that being able to meet the demands with our banks, with our institutions, and one of the aspects that I've kind of found with my staff, and I take this from Stephen Kotler with the Global Research Collective Group, where he talks about it's really not our fault. We look at from a neurological standpoint, it's our old brain. It was developed from a sequential standpoint, and we're not really equipped to deal with probabilistic uncertainties. So with my particular team, really kind of look as far as the certainties that we do have, and looking at this new normal as a really exceptional opportunity, how to do things different, learn from it, build from it, but to be real about it, to kind of really discover what we can learn from it in this particular environment. And as long as we're not in a jeopardized situation, we can learn from it and do better in the future from it, being more optimistic while being realistic.
How often are you meeting with your team, Rhodey?
We meet once a week. We have, and something I'm introducing to them that I'm taking from Simon Sinek, which is what they do every Monday. It's called the Huddle, where we're all connecting virtually and sharing pretty much what happened over the weekend, what's going on personally, and not talking about work.
Great. There's a coaching methodology that we use in terms of, when I'm, before having a conversation, I will say to the client, what is everything you're coming into this conversation with? And what is everything you're leaving this conversation with? Because that's occupying that brain space. And we find that actually tempers the amygdala so they can actually focus. So those little check-ins about doing it like, hey, what are you coming into this week with? And what do you have to look forward to ahead, so that we can actually really focus on, and being, again, that deep listening and being present with one another is a key insight. We call it, clearing the space. So, Linda, I'd be curious to know from your perspective. Let me just see here if I can get you to, trying to move my cursor here. Linda Gabriel. So what is something you're doing to balance this dynamic? Because I think this is the trickiest one that I think we're all having to face. Linda, are you there? Apparently not. It's okay to pass. I'm not anything.
Scott, I can jump in.
Sure.
Yeah. So my wife and I, we had a baby just a week ago. And we are in Los Angeles, and our second child. And so we are moving from Los Angeles also soon to Arizona. But right now in these times, we got to make a lot of decisions. And instead of us actually arguing for a preferred solution, we have decided to really come up with our interests first. What are our options? So actually we are assessing first, what are all the different options rather than arguing for one preferred options or a preferred solution. We're just trying to scan the horizon and see what are all the different options. Let's get them out on the table, and then from there, we can actually make a decision. And what we have realized is in this process of just being open and keeping the conversation going is that we are coming up with a solution that we actually didn't even think about going into the conversation. And at times it also takes some time to just come up to that solution. So we're taking ourselves some time and not rushing to conclusion, but just being curious rather than getting furious, right? So just like staying open and then seeing when we have clarity, we take a step forward and we make that decision. And unless it's obvious to us what the right choice is, we keep exploring the options.
Yeah, that's great. And just so you know, everybody, that Joseph, just share today's celebration with your new son.
Yeah, so in my tradition, in my culture, what we do is on the 8th day, we have a Brit Milah, and that's actually a very public event where community members come into your home and they witness the ceremony. And due to the current circumstances, what we did was a live event. And I don't know who it was who shared that with a supper club and making it a virtual event. We had a virtual Brit Milah, and which allowed us really to include people from all across the world that otherwise would not be included in a ceremony like this. And they were really, everybody had front row seats in a ceremony that otherwise can get a little bit crowded and get a little bit, because it's very social. So we didn't have all these social distractions, and everybody sat at the convenience from their screen, and they heard the blessings and the prayers and the songs that we sang. And Scott, you were there. And there were some rabbis involved, and they had seen many Brit Milah, and they considered this to be one of the sweetest Brit Milah ceremony that they had been part of. So it's really something that we wouldn't even have thought about doing in a regular life circumstances, but in this time we did, and it was beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Well, and I think you bring up, I mean, in that experience that I experienced and I got to witness, and it brought tears to my eyes just because of just the sheer, the ritual that I got to see and experience with you, and I appreciate being invited. But the thing that I keep pushing around, especially as we're moving into this virtual space, is how do we keep the humanity intact? Like there was so much, it was such a beautiful ritual that I got to witness virtually. And I've also had some great meetings and strategy sessions done virtually because we keep the human element embedded in it. And so again, a lot of times when we're struggling with this virtual space, it's really the process. I mean, we started and you had Aviva playing the guitar. I mean, it just sucked everyone in. And I just think that there are some really good strategies. So if you are struggling to figure out ways to, bring in that humanity into your process virtually, definitely reach out to the Collaborative Commons. And I know that there's a myriad of people out here that can offer it. But I want to kind of give anyone who hasn't had a chance to speak, and I apologize for not being able to get to everyone, is just to kind of share what are opportunities or what are you looking forward to? And I know we're out of time, but I want to kind of hit on this and then a couple other, just one more announcement for next week. So thank you guys for bearing with me. But what's something that you see as an opportunity on the other side of this door? So anybody be willing to share?
Guys, I'll share something, Scotty, based on the meeting
why is my
that I had yesterday.
working?
And basically,
somebody should be on mute right now.
Yeah, I can hear someone's trying to talk.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right, you're up, Mark.
Yeah, so basically, I was meeting with an executive management team yesterday and the CEO, and as we were having the meeting, the announcements coming out of the government were even changing the topics that we were talking about. And we had to really recalibrate. And so when I stripped it back down, I asked them 3 questions. And in terms of walking through the door and what does the other side look like? So what does a good outcome now really look like for this organisation or this team? If we have to recalibrate and rethink things, let's make sure that our goals are really SMART goals or VISTA goals, and that we may not hit the organisational goals or priorities that we were setting for ourselves in our initial strategic planning, but if we recalibrate, what is a good outcome? And I think it's a very important question.
It would be interesting on that point, Mark. It'd be curious to know how many of you guys are bringing in. The answer is that our people get through it unscathed. You know, that this idea, a lot of strategies, we talk about people, but it's kind of like, is it really matter? And I think what I'm hearing in the narrative is like, our people matter. I mean, and it's always so interesting how a crisis is what brings people to show up and humanity to show up. So I'm always curious about, you know, are they talking about to the human side of their new strategy?
Yeah, and I believe so, because the very next question that I posed to the group, or put to the group yesterday, was really, what support do you need from me? But more so, what do you need from each other to make this happen?
Great question.
And you know, we talk about people will support what they themselves create. So let's involve our people in that conversation. Let's give them some ownership. And as soon as we started to change the narrative around that, the level of engagement, even though we're working remotely, went through the roof. And I think that's really important, that we create those safe places where people feel that, one, they're valued, their contribution is valued, and they're also feeling that sense of unity, a sense of almost collaboration in action itself, because quite often people don't always get those, or aren't always given those opportunities. So let's create the spaces and the opportunities and invite them through the door.
Building also on what Mark was saying regarding the goals, it's also, and that makes me think, Simon Sinek, he published recently a book called The Infinite Game. Rather than like a goal is something like the game is going to continue even past the goal, right? You want to play an infinite game, and right now it's about staying in the game and becoming better at playing the game. That's the difference between an infinite mind player versus a finite player.
Right.
And inside of that, you got to demonstrate existential flexibility. So for many of us, the way we have been conducting ourselves is maybe we need to completely reinvent ourselves and let go of the old ways in order to make room for something new. Right? So it's, again, demonstrating existential flexibility, courageous leadership, have trust in teams, and have a worthy cause. And I think it comes back to something that Lauren Burgess teaches with the Human Value Center, making value-based decisions. Like, again, like you have your goals, but how do you want to be attaining these goals? Who do you want to be as a team, as yourself, as a company? And it comes back to the company values. Are these company values, can they really hold true right now, or do they need to be modified in order to help you reach whatever periodic goals there are along the way?
Yeah, Catherine brings up a good point. I think a lot of traditional hierarchies, and when you talk about that infinite versus the finite, it goes back to Carol Dweck's work about growth mindset versus closed mindset. Is like, how do we maintain that growth mindset? So I think you're spot on there, Catherine. John Pearson, you had your hand up. What do you got to add? What are you going to share, brother?
Well, I think, one, thanks for putting this together, and good to see everybody. Congratulations, Joseph. But I really think that the opportunity is there because the game has changed, right? So if you look at the tourism industry, you know, even just locally.
I don't want to have, I'm just saying, if you.
Someone in the background.
That's me, I'm sorry.
No worries.
So even just locally, you know, it's going to take a whole different approach and a whole different collaborative mindset to start bringing people locally to then stay in hotels, to spend money in restaurants. And I think that paradigm has to shift. And so rather than, you know, we always talk about, oh, everybody's siloed or all these organizations are kind of out for themselves. It's going to really take a group effort, I think, to do it, especially in kind of our small little, you know, hamlet of Chico, especially after something like the campfire where people are already shell-shocked. So now, you know, you've got double whammy. You have to change that, and you really have to look at a collaborative approach for those opportunities that may not have been there before, but have to be there now if everybody's going to survive together.
Well, again, it's part of the brain is our ability to connect is so key in a crisis because our mere survival depends upon coming together. So it's such an interesting dynamic there. So first of all, if there's no one else that would like to add to the comments, feel free to reach out. I do want to share with you our next session is going to be scheduled for Monday. where I'm going to be introducing some tools around future scouting. And part of this is, thanks, Jim, this idea around how many of you guys ever, and I think when we're dealing with a lot of uncertainty, we kind of can react without necessarily understanding the implications of our choices. And so this is a tool that I'll be highlighting. A guy named Jim Shearer will be joining us, kind of talking us through a way of thinking about how do we plan for a future that isn't yet known, through a thinking exercise that is often a very useful exercise, especially if anyone's ever said this to yourself. If you've ever said, if I only would have known then what I know now, I wouldn't have made that decision. And so what this allows us to do is to really kind of think about the future and throw out some potential possibilities, because you can see from that image that one possibility can lead to all those things, and the colors represent desirability and likelihood equations. And I think a lot of times when people are resistant to something, it's coming down to, is it desirable and is it likely? If it's highly desirable, not very likely, it's probably an investment question. If it's highly likely but not very desirable, it's a mitigation question. And so if we could think smarter together about what the future can hold for us, to your point, John, around, okay, what would happen if, well, let's put that question down into the center and explore that from a community-wide, in a community-wide narrative in a language, so we can actually really anticipate and plan in a way that leverages all of our resources. So this is going to be available. We'll be posting this week. And I'm looking forward to you guys joining. Spread the word. If you guys do want to be a part of the Collaborative Commons, I have your email addresses through your signups. I will send the invitation through the Collaborative Commons. It's through Mighty Networks. And feel free, if you don't want to sign up, that's fine. But this is where we're going to be posting more data. We also have a YouTube channel. Joseph and I and Mark have been posting little vignettes called The Sheet Between Us, and it's all about strategies to deal with this stuff between you and another person, introducing models from Ethan's work in the human element, as well as some of the work from the flow science space. And so you can also sign up to the YouTube channel, but we'll send you all that information in our email. And if you guys have any other topics that you want to explore, feel free to reach out and just add your stuff to this Commons, because it's through community that we heal and we grow together. So I want to say thank you to everybody who participated. I hope it was, I know that I learned some things. Definitely moved me some tears, some of the conversations and comments. And everyone that was in attendance, I have so much admiration for those that I know. Those that I don't know yet, I'm hoping to reach out and meet personally at some point. But I just want to say thank you guys all for a great evening for those of you on the East Coast, and a great morning for those of you on the Australian side of the equation. But thank you guys, and let's circle back and make sure we stay connected. All right. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Joseph.
Thank you all.
All right. We'll see you guys.